are there just too many people with a security clearance? That's the question a lot of people are asking following the leak announcement that it was a 21-year-old National Guard service member in Massachusetts who allegedly is responsible for disclosing hundreds of pages of classified documents. Hi, this is Lindy Kaiser with ClearanceJobs.com. This is nothing new. We saw it after Edward Snowden. We saw it after Manning. We've seen it after every major leak or incident involving classified information. This question of, do we have too many people with security clearances? You will always get pushback from me here at Clearance Jobs that no, we do not. If there are too many, trust that I will tell you. I've seen a ton of misinformation, kind of just random reporting about the number of people that have access to classified information and what those numbers are. What we see today is a national security talent shortage. So for me, my pushback is always, if we have a shortage of people in this workforce, we cannot also say that we have too many people with security clearances out there. Also, too, we report on those figures over at clearancejobs.com. We have the eligible and then in-access population. We've seen the in-access population going down, which I have pointed to as a labor shortage issue, but it also tells me that the government is doing a good job of ensuring that people who don't need their classification anymore are not holding on to active clearances unless they're actually in a billet that requires it. So that's the issue here. Did this service member have the eligibility he needed? That's what's going to come out of this. I always will point to policy versus process. So I'm getting a ton of questions about, hey, is this a breakdown in the security clearance policy as it exists? There's always room to tweak. We've been talking about social media monitoring as a part of the security clearance process. I think this will help kind of put the accelerator around the social media monitoring piece of a security clearance background investigation. But I would point to this as a process failure and not a policy failure. Now that's semantics, but I think it comes down to, how did this individual get that information? How did they take photos of that information is a huge issue. And what kind of digital tracking did we have to say, hey, why is this individual looking at all of this stuff? And did this individual need to look at all of the stuff that he was allegedly looking at? So that's what we need to see. We always have this pendulum swing back and forth between kind of opening the doors, reducing the stovepipes, creating information sharing across the intelligence community, because we don't want the stovepipes that we had pre 9/11 where information wasn't being shared between agencies. And then going back and forth to say, hey, do we need to revert to a closer need to know so that things like this don't happen? So you don't have a quote unquote low ranking service member who's accessing information he doesn't need. I can't say for sure that this individual didn't have the access or authorities that he needed. I think a lot of speculation about that right now is just speculation. Unless you have a clearance and you're in the government offices and you are in the briefings and you know what's going on there, and in which case you shouldn't be talking about it on the internet. Unless you're that person, we're just all speculating about what kind of went wrong. I think there's going to be a lot of good movement around the social media monitoring piece. But from my vantage point, I will still say it looks like a process issue and not a holistic, let's burn the house down. The security clearance policy piece is broken. I think there's some procedural issues likely at play. But when I get the question, does this show that we have too many people with a security clearance? My answer is no. So that's my hot take. Not so hot, not short. You can't get short answers from me. On the news announcements this week and the questions around the security clearance policy and process and why a 21-year-old had access to all of that information. But for more on that, for more on classification procedures, for more on the big ticket issue, which is overclassification, keeping track of our classified documents, and better digital tracking of who has access to those, read more of our articles over at clearancejobs.com.